Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the show. It's Wednesday morning. As promised yesterday, we said we would come back the next day with a continuing nonstop stream of experts. If you thought yesterday was nuts with how many people we had, guess what? We've actually got more today. It's so bad, folks, let me share with you. They're actually having to bring food to us because we don't have a chance to get away from the camera. That's how much we're talking today with the industry's experts. So kicking off the show, I've got two, not one, two experts here today. You're going to meet them now. I want you to meet Joe Schmidt and Tony Mangino. How you doing, guys?
Great.
Doing well, Daryl, thanks.
All right, now you guys are with TechCaliber Consulting, is that right?
That's correct.
All right, so tell me a little bit about TechCaliber Consulting so our audience kind of understands where you're coming from.
Right, so TechCaliber Consulting, TC2, is a consultancy that only represents enterprise customers. Our clients tend to be very large, typically multinational clients, and we support them through all things telecom and ICT, through the whole telecom life cycle, from strategy to procurement to contract negotiations, benchmarking, regulatory assessments, and we've been a firm for, I think, about 18 years.
About 18 years.
18 years. Now you guys have both been there with 18 years?
I've been with TC2 now over 15 years.
Wow.
And I've been with them approximately 16, 17 years.
So you guys are completely not normal, just so we know. You're supposed to change jobs every 2 years. Didn't you get the memo on that?
Well, that's the beauty of what TC2 does, because we're like always in the market, always doing deals with ICT and telecom services. It's a very collegial environment. I mean, and it's not a one and done relationship with our clients. We tend to have long-term relationships with clients. And I know I've done 20, 25 projects with the same client over the last 16 years. So it's actually a very exciting environment to work in.
So that client, 20 to 25, they're a favorite client, aren't they?
Well, what's great is that we seem to be that continuity factor with our clients where, their leadership comes and goes, their stakeholders come and go, but we're that one.
You guys have the tribal knowledge. That's
we know
actually,
where the bodies are buried.
You know where
Yeah, exactly.
All right, now TechCaliber Consulting. I'm assuming you've got a website.
We do. It's www.techcaliber.com.
All right, guys. So do the multitasking thing. Go to techcaliber.com while I'm talking with Joe and Tony. We're going to get into it. Now, if I understand, Little Birdie told me that you guys are doing a session on SIP trunking at the show, and it's focusing on procurement. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right. So question we had for you was, is SIP trunking procurement now pretty straightforward? Because as you said, you've been doing this for a few years between the two of you. Is it straightforward now versus before? How has it changed?
I think really the key here is that the procurement of SIP trunking services is really evolving, right? 5 or 6 years ago, when SIP trunking really came in vogue in the enterprise space, what you were seeing was these large multinational corporations that were doing their first pilot or proof of concept of these services, right? So it wasn't really a mature enough technology. The marketplace wasn't mature enough. So the sort of the key principal approach to procuring services wasn't as mature as well. So what we're seeing now is that sort of the early adopters of SIP services are now in perhaps their second or third deal cycles procuring these services. And what that does is it presents an opportunity. Right? As the market matures, as the services themselves mature, customers now are also much more involved in understanding what their requirements are, right? And understanding those requirements helps you to be prescriptive with your suppliers, right? So what does that mean? When we say being prescriptive, it's understanding and being able to communicate to the marketplace what your needs are from a demand perspective, from the needs of the network. So what are the types of MPLS ports that you need to support the SIP trunking deployment? Also, what's the impact of all of this on your revenue commitments with your suppliers, right? Now that we have a much better understanding of our traffic flows, how much revenue is flowing through that particular service, it can help you to better calibrate your revenue commitment with the supplier. There's a few other things that are really driving that evolution in the SIP trunking procurement space. First is having an opportunity to kind of take a fresh look at the SLAs or the service levels based on a real world deployment, not just sort of a framework of SLAs that you may have brought into your early transformation to the service. The other is to take a fresh look at the network design. right? Based on application flow, based on the demand and the usage, you may have, your early deployment may have been a hybrid design, where you've got a centralized solution with some of your remote endpoints also having their own trunks. You might find that hybrid solution should really be collapsed into a much more centralized. Or you could go the other direction and look at a really distributed type of model. So it's this wave of procurement is really giving enterprise customers an opportunity to sharpen their pencils.
So, and to add to that, as Tony said, we've been buying SIP trunking services for the better part of the last 5-6 years. So we've been doing this for US-centric companies. We've been doing this for companies outside of the US. So we're buying SIP trunking not just in the US, but in countries outside of the US. We've been buying SIP trunking on a regional basis, so pan-European, pan-Asia Pacific, and we've been doing global SIP trunking deals. So because we're doing all of this SIP trunking procurement, we're learning a great deal about SIP trunking procurement. So we're constantly at TC2, we're constantly updating our knowledge base, we're refining our tools, we're adjusting the approach that we take when buying SIP trunking services. Now, if you've never bought SIP trunking services, or if your knowledge of SIP trunking is somewhat limited, then buying SIP trunking can be complicated. To sort of emphasize what Tony has said, if you don't define the right requirements, if you don't ask the suppliers the right questions, if you don't know the business case, if you don't develop the right business case and know how to calculate the correct real total cost of ownership for SIP trunking, then you'll probably be disappointed with the results of your SIP trunking procurement.
So you guys bring up an interesting point, because you have been doing it for so long and because you've seen so many deployments and had to go through this for so many cycles, yes, it's getting maybe easier, but that's somewhat a relative term. And it's still easy to make a mistake. So investing in someone like yourself is a great way at making sure the process is a success the first time, and then you can learn alongside you guys. I think a big thing. Now, you talked a little bit about procurement. So let me ask you this. As we look at the vendor landscape in the SIP trunking space, is it changing? Because we hear that it's changing a lot overall. And then how is that affecting the pricing and the procurement process?
Well, I think one thing that I really want to make sure that the enterprise customers take away from this discussion is that there really is a lot of opportunity to continue to reduce cost with SIP trunking. A lot of early adopters of the service, what they found was that there was savings in just the transformation, right? Moving that initial forklift from legacy TDM voice to SIP trunking, right? So you're ripping out very expensive local PRIs, and the business case looks really good. What I want to emphasize is there are still very, very compelling opportunities to reduce cost with a SIP trunking solution. And the reason is that because the actual service elements themselves, right? So the cost of the SIP trunks, the cost per minute for the usage, that is dropping with market forces, just as well as the underlying MPLS transport and the Ethernet access that is the underlying transport mechanism for the services. So as all of those piece parts, right, that are subject to downward pricing pressure,
yeah,
right, all those components of the service continue to drop as Joe and myself continue to source these services, and the offerings from the supplier perspective continue to mature. There really is a renewed and continual opportunity to drive cost reduction with SIP trunking. Now, that's sort of the first bit of it. The other point that I want to make, and I think this is probably more in line with your question, is the suppliers are decommissioning their legacy voice systems, right? So we're now at a point where the decision is being made for you. When we go to market for large enterprise customers, what we're seeing is your AT&Ts, your Verizons, your CenturyLinks. So these are more the domestic players, but the reality is global as well. They don't want to bid legacy TDM voice. They will if they're an incumbent, and you can use the RFP to leverage them to reduce the existing cost, right? But what we're seeing is any offers for new voice services are going to be on your wide area network, right? So it's going to be a SIP trunking type of solution, and that puts customers in an interesting situation in terms of forcing that trajectory to a SIP-based voice environment.
So what's interesting, when we first started doing SIP trunking procurements, a lot of the old school telecom service providers didn't want to offer SIP trunking. And they made it very difficult for our clients to migrate away from TDM infrastructure, TDM voice, to SIP trunking. But today, probably every major and minor service provider, telecom service provider globally has some sort of SIP trunking service offering. The market for SIP trunking has allowed new suppliers to come in and compete with those old school telecom service providers to the benefit, frankly, of the enterprise, where the enterprise, because of the way SIP trunking works, and depending on how they design their solution and how they deploy that solution, they could have multiple service providers offering and providing and provisioning their wide area network and their SIP trunking solution, or in many cases, they can actually rationalize suppliers and have a single supplier provide the entire estate, the entire WAN infrastructure, and the SIP trunking solution. To expand on your point about pricing and procurement, we've seen significant changes in the pricing for SIP trunking. And what we find, though, is that our clients, the clients that really benefit the most from that, are the ones that do their homework before they go to market with an RFP, before they go to buy SIP trunking. And at TC2, we constantly bang on the table and tell our clients, you need to know your traffic. But what does that mean? What that means in this context is that you have to have a detailed understanding of the traffic that's going to be migrated to the SIP trunking environment. You need to have a comprehensive inventory of your WAN infrastructure. You need to have a very good understanding of the utilization of your wide area network. And then you need to build a model that brings that all together so that you can understand the new environment. And once you understand that new environment, then you can go to market, then you can get the pricing, then you know what price points are important to you as an enterprise and what you need to negotiate with those service providers.
Really gives you that, to Joe's point, it really gives you the transparency, right? And gives you the opportunity as an enterprise to negotiate with the suppliers from a position of strength.
All right, so with that as the framework, you kind of alluded to a little bit. I'm going to guess that most clients have probably now implemented SIP based on the maturity of the space. Is that a fair statement?
So, again, at TC2, we only represent enterprise customers.
Sure.
Right? So our clients, again, tend to be big companies, often multinationals. I would say that the vast majority of our clients have implemented SIP to some extent. Some have done it all in, they've completely migrated. Some have done it on a country by country, select country by country basis, and some have deployed it, but in a much more limited scope, where they haven't fully taken advantage of all the features and functionality of SIP trunking.
So then based on that, are you seeing some are already, some, to your point, some have done this, some of that, are some already looking to move on to some other services?
Well, I would say that the notion of moving on really is building on those initial deployments, refining those deployments, right? But also to Joe's point, extending that value proposition from the early days of local replacement, maybe some outbound long distance, and now we're seeing customers with very complex inbound toll-free environments, right, that have done the pilots, have done the proof of concepts, and the supplier offerings are now in line with that complexity. So we're seeing very large call center-oriented operations that are now forklifting their inbound toll-free feature-rich environments to a SIP trunking solution. And I think that, SIP has come a long way in a very short amount of time, and it's really one of those arrows in your quiver in terms of a really comprehensive unified communication and collaboration sort of suite of services. Each and every enterprise customer that we do deals for, SIP trunking is in the mix. right? And depending on what the value you need to extract from that service, it varies from deal to deal, for sure. But it's definitely a key component in an overall strategy and profile for a multinational enterprise customer.
And what's happened with SIP trunking is our clients are now on the next wave of assessing their SIP trunking requirements. And what they've learned over the last several years is that SIP trunking works. Now they've had some issues, they've had some problems, they've had some bugs to work out, but they've worked that out.
Right.
And they realize that the ROI on SIP trunking is very compelling. They save money with SIP trunking, and that's always a key driver. So to expand upon what Tony said, our clients are now using more of the services that SIP trunking has available. SIP trunking, it's a core component of unified communications, and so many of our clients are now deploying unified communications solutions. They're now taking advantage of, because they trust SIP trunking, they're now taking advantage of inbound calling features, and it's a key part of their call center and contact center solution. They're expanding beyond the United States. They're now buying these services outside of the US and looking to do things on a global scale. And what we're also finding is where maybe our clients, in some cases, were hesitant to look away from their core WAN service provider. Now they're very much willing to entertain niche providers of SIP trunking in their environment. So in my opinion, I think SIP trunking, along with unified communications, cloud, and maybe SD-WAN, those four components, those four initiatives are going to be probably priority for the enterprise IT shop for the next 18 months to 2 years.
All right, so with that as the backdrop, circling back to where we began, you guys have a session coming up. When is that session? Do you know?
We better know. It's at 2 o'clock today.
I think it's 2 o'clock.
2 o'clock today. All right, so you guys can check out Tony Mangino, Joe Schmidt of TechCaliber Consulting, 2 o'clock today at the session. Learn all about SIP trunking. In the meantime, guys, thanks for the show. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed the information. Lots of information there. You guys are going to have to hit replay to catch it all, because these guys just, bam, they hit us with a tidal wave of information. Thanks again, guys.
Thanks,
Stay tuned, guys. We have got a great interview with Microsoft coming up next. We're going to be live shortly. In the meantime, enjoy the show.